I'm the descendant of Romans and an armchair Roman history expert. This is why everyone can't stop talking about my ancestors and what it means for the future of America. About a month ago, Gaius Flavius posted the original question or challenge to women on Instagram. The responses to his challenge have gone viral on TikTok. There's been a secondary wave of memes asking why this is the case. Why are men thinking about Rome so often? A common response that I'm seeing is that it was the last high water mark in the Western world, and that it was one of the highest marks in human history. That's something I agree with. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think that what they did echoes through us and eternity in very specific ways. They pushed the frontiers of technology, art, literature, philosophy, and law. And all of those things have a direct legacy on how we go about our day-to-day. So of course we're going to be thinking about it. But Rome also offers a fascinating story. The Republic to Empire transition is something that everyone in the modern world is familiar with thanks to the Star Wars franchise. And that's a transition that right now, I think at an intuitive level, people, especially in the United States, feel like they are experiencing. That there is a threat of losing a republic and inheriting an empire. I mentioned that I was an armchair historian. I'm a little bit more credentialed than that. I trained with Dr. Winthrop Lindsay Adams, who was the president of the Association of Ancient Historians. I was lucky enough to be his guest at the 2010 annual conference. He oversaw my senior thesis, my honors thesis, The Fathers, Heroes, Traitors, and Saviors, Myths in Early Republics. It was a comparative analysis of the Roman Republic and the early American Republic. My PhD, however, is in economics with specializations in econometrics, that's data, and economic history. So let's talk about why people are obsessed with the Roman world. And I'm going to expand it to be the Republic and the Empire, because that's what people associate. When they talk about the Empire, they think it is one continuous thing, but it's not. As a power, Rome was one of many in the classical world. Starting in the Middle East, in the Mesopotamian area, the land between the rivers, you saw empires in Egypt, you saw smaller empires popping up in Greece. But by the time that you get to the Roman period, you're talking about 1,000 years of dominance over the entire Mediterranean, over 1/5 of the global population, 65 million people strong living under one political banner, one political system, one economic system, one legal system, and sharing in many of the same tapestries of social life. Rome was a direct inheritor of the Greek legacy. But the 1,000 years of Roman rule can be divided into these two periods, the Roman Republic and then the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar and Augustus sit in between those. So the story that most people are familiar with is the midpoint in this 1,000 years of Roman history. In that 1,000 years, Rome added considerably to the frontiers of technology, art, language, philosophy, and law. Some of these things you're already familiar with. Concrete is a great example. You're probably familiar with aqueducts. You may know less about their incredible sewer systems. You probably know about the roads. Arches in architecture, a steam engine, military strategies that were used for cavalry tactics until World War I. Stoicism has become popular again, Christianity, and political systems based on checks and balances. So let's dig into each of these in a little bit of detail. Technologically, concrete and arches are awesome, but the Romans had machines. And I'm talking about the Roman world, not just the Roman core. Much of this was in Alexandria, another legacy of the Greeks and the Egyptians. You can go on YouTube and watch this video of a Lego recreation of this complex machine used for tracking objects in the sky, solar objects. This is high technology. Rome was also close to an industrial revolution. They had a steam engine in the form of a novelty used for stage performance and theatrical performance. This is something that would be equivalent to audiovisual equipment today. Why this did not translate into an industrial revolution is still being debated. Keep in mind that once the modern world had steam engines, it took more than 100 years to figure out that they could be used for things beyond pumping water out of mines. Supposedly the military looked at this technology, but Trajan, the emperor at the time, turned it away, believing that it would make the soldiers too cowardly. The Romans also continued with a long tradition of pushing the physical arts. This was in buildings, sculptures, written, visual arts. The Aeneid may be the first reboot in the Western world. Tourists still flock to the areas of these Roman ruins today. And you'll see in a moment how their stylistic legacy carried it through the Renaissance to modern America. Linguistically, 1.2 billion people in the world today are speaking Romantic languages. That's 13% of the global population. If you add on English speakers who are using 60% of their words from Latin but are using a Germanic language, you're at about 2 billion of the 8 billion global population, so almost 1 in 4. But those Roman numerals didn't stick, huh? Philosophically, the Romans made two important contributions: Stoicism, which is really popular right now, and Epicureanism, which is not just an excuse, a blank check for hedonism. It has some very interesting introspections around the role of fear in life and the importance of friendship. But of all the legacies that Rome has left the Western world and the global world, Roman law and law is, quote, the greatest factor in the creation of modern civilization. And it is the greatest intellectual legacy of Rome, end quote. Now, Roman law in the West has grown up alongside and influenced English common law, but they are distinct. So America is an inheritor of both, but Rome provided one of the main models for the founding fathers as they created the American Constitution. Rome also had early markets, capitalism, by the formal definition, commodity exchange using clear monetary units, currency, with international markets. Rome was connected to all known parts of the world. And during the imperial period, to show the power of the emperor, things like Trajan's market, which gave us the model of the modern shopping mall, would bring in these commodities from all over the world for consumption by local Romans. And at its height, 1 in 5 of the global population were Roman, living in this geographical area under one political banner, which carried all of the trappings of the Republic into the imperial period. So what went wrong then? In a recent course I taught, we asked ChatGPT to weigh in, and this was the bullet point list it provided. And these are the typical explanations that you get from academics. Barbarian invasions, decline of legions, economic crisis, political instability, moral decline, the rise of Christianity, administrative and bureaucratic overload, urban decay and depopulation, technological stagnation, and the split of the empire. I don't think it was any one of these things that ultimately took down the Roman people. It was a mix of them all happening at once. But I do want to highlight 2 that I think were particularly important, and which we're seeing echoes of today in America and across the Western world. The first is the constant appeal to entertainment as a distraction. In the Roman case, this was gladiatorial games in an arena not unlike most modern football stadiums, and circus, which was their form of NASCAR, watching chariots go round and round with the potential of death always present. But this was their Hollywood. This was something that brought the entire public together in a communal experience, but which ultimately was distracting from the rot that was happening underneath and around everyone. Another aspect of the late empire was the continual appeal to the dole, buying public support and buying factions of the public support, until the factions themselves were warring over everything. And these factions could be something that we would equate to a sports team affiliation, which were the chariot colors. But in the end, the role of entertainment as a form of distraction is undeniable. Coincidentally, at the same time that this distraction is taking place, there is an ever-increasing war being waged within the elites over the reins of power themselves. The collapse of the Republic into the Empire was part of this story. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Adams' class, that in spite of everything, Rome still had so many good emperors, because the infighting gets vicious. And I personally believe that this is what leads to and contributes to most of the other things that were on ChatGPT's list. And that if any one of them had happened, they could have been managed. But the fact that so many happened simultaneously meant that those who had fought over power were not there to use it effectively. And you see similar social critique popping up in the early imperial period, with the revival of satire, most importantly under Juvenal, who poses this question: who will guard the guardians or who will watch the watchers? When everyone's distracted and the elites fight over power, everything collapses. And we saw this in Rome when the Western Empire fell. For another 1,000 years, the Eastern Empire continued under the Byzantine Empire. And when that fell, they went to Moscow, where they called themselves czars, which means Caesars. I'm skipping over the Dark Ages because they're so dark, but the Renaissance is relevant because this is a rebirth of that lost knowledge of the classical world. Rome becomes the model for reforming the humanist world, funded through international commercial enterprises. This is the Western world getting back to the baseline that it had lost with the collapse of the Roman Empire. Fast forward a few centuries, and you get to the modern inheritors of the banner of Rome, America. And like Rome, we are on the precipice of losing a republic and inheriting an empire. This is the Fall of America Index by Luciano, put together as part of the class that I mentioned before. You can go to this Google Doc. There's a README. You can see what data we're using. But we took the list from ChatGPT and went out and found publicly available data sets to analyze trends along those dimensions to see where America is in the likelihood of collapse. If you want to learn more about Rome, there are some wonderful resources that are available to anyone. All of them are made possible by the same company under different names: the Teaching Company, the Great Courses, and now Wondrium. These are on-demand options that you can often find at your public library. 2 courses from their enormous catalog that I highly recommend. The first is The History of Ancient Rome by Garrett Fagan. That's 48 lectures that will cover the entire Republic and Imperial period. And that will really teach you the high-level history of Rome. The second course is Famous Romans by J. Rufus Fears. And this will really put a human face on who the individual Romans in that timeline that you've learned from Garrett Fagan are. But check your local library, because they'll often have even the tape cassettes, CDs, DVDs of these courses. If you want more on the comparative analysis of Rome and America, you can enroll in A Gladiator's Guide to America, and learn how capitalism transformed America into an unrivaled economic miracle and what you can do to keep it growing. And remember that Rome is eternal because Rome lives here.